Well, the fight against evil never ends, and maybe the Slayer can return. Hey there, folks. So, there had been news a little while back about a potential revival for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Now, initially, I saw that and went, oh, okay, and didn't think too much about it. Except that at the time that I'm talking, which will probably be a couple of weeks in the past from when this video goes up, but at the time that I'm recording this, things are moving forward like quite quickly. They have production offices. They're really actively working on this, which is why I kind of want to talk about it. Not so much about Buffy specifically, although I am going to be using it as the example, but kind of talking about a bit of a broader topic that is going to be, I think, relevant for more than a few properties in the future. And that is, can a property move past a problematic creator? Because Buffy was, of course, created by one Joss Whedon. He wrote the original screenplay for the film and then went on to showrun the TV adaptation, which is the beloved thing. He also delved directly into some of the other mediums. He wrote a number of the comics. He was very intrinsic to the property. And yeah, he hasn't worked in a little while, and there is pretty good reason for that. So we don't really like to talk about Joss around here. But the property looks like it's still going to try and revive and move forward. And I think it's interesting to look at that because there are ways in which it resembles some things, some other properties that maybe could take a similar path. And then there are some other properties that can't do what this is doing. And I will sort of talk about that as I go. But first, let's address the big thing. Whedon has no part in this whatsoever. And I don't just mean no creative part, because the thing that I can't help but compare this to, if I'm going to claim that a property can move past a problematic creator, we need to at least touch on the notion of Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling, because there are certainly plenty of people who want to be able to take Harry Potter and move it away from her. But there's a massive difference. Rowling still owns that property. Like, Warner Brothers licenses it. They make a ton of money off of it, but she owns it. She controls it. Unless she sells her entire stake in the property, which I have done a video before on why I don't think she is ever going to do that, then it's not the same situation as something like Buffy, because Whedon has no control over Buffy. This actually has been a point of contention in the past before everything kind of blew up with Whedon, because there was talk at a few different points about possible reboots or even an animated series, and it was always a question, would Whedon be involved? And it was an open question because he doesn't own the rights. Like, he had creative control over the show because the people who actually owned the rights to Buffy let him. But he only has original creator credit. He doesn't own it. He's not going to make money off of it. He's not going to be entitled to that if he doesn't actually work on it. So it actually can move past him, unlike Rowling. And there's also another thing, because regardless of the fact that Harry Potter has expanded out beyond the books, obviously, and there's movies and lots of people work on those, and there's video games and lots of people work on those, it all narrows down to Rowling. She is responsible for everything that it is based on. Now, while Whedon is responsible for the initial concept for sure, the overall plot progressions, and certainly more than a few specific scripts and even directing episodes, he also wasn't the only one who worked on it. From the get-go, because unlike Harry Potter, which is a novel, meaning it is the creation of one person with assistance from editors back when she was properly being edited, but that's another tangent. But he always had other people working with him right from the get-go. He is not 100% responsible for the characters. They were a co-creation between him and the actors. He is not responsible for every script. He had a whole team of script writers. Was he supervising them? Sure. He didn't write everything. He didn't direct everything. From the get-go, it was always a group and communal project. Now, was it more his creation than any other one single person? Yes. Is it his creation above the cumulative effort of everyone else who worked on this thing? I would argue no. Just because he's the most identifiable single creative voice doesn't mean that it overrides everybody else. Now, while I have myself made the choice to not really engage in Whedon's work, even stuff that I've liked in the past, since all the nonsense with him came out and we now know the kind of guy that he is, I don't begrudge those who do. There's a YouTube channel called Passion of the Nerd, run by a guy named Ian, who I do consider to be a friend, who has continued to work through an episode-by-episode guide of Buffy. It's these wonderful analysis videos, and I'm glad he's continued to do it, and he's made a point of not talking about Joss's specific contributions as much as possible and focusing on other people. And honestly, I had been a little concerned when it was clear that he was going to do that episodes were going to feel like, boy, it's super obvious he can't talk about, this guy who was a major part of it. But the thing is, there's lots of other stuff to talk about. There's other writers to highlight. There's actors to highlight. There's the direction. There's the performances, the action choreography. There's plenty of stuff for him to look at and analyze, and he does it brilliantly. So this certainly by no means that I'm going to start talking about Whedon again. I'm still personally not comfortable doing it, but it's nice to see there because, again, unlike Rowling, it doesn't definitely, immediately, irrevocably, and automatically contribute to Whedon. It doesn't contribute to him financially. It doesn't contribute to his reputation. And it's not going to bring him back and give him any more clout, because the thing to remember is, while there are certainly aspects of Buffy as a product that haven't aged great, it's from the 90s. Of course, it hasn't aged perfectly. But at the same time, the big problems were him. Behind the scenes, the way he behaved, the way he treated people. And if he's not there, then the problem isn't there. Potentially, at least. There's another thing that they've done that probably is going to help a lot in terms of getting people to be willing to give it a shot. Because if we set the reputation and the problematic history of Whedon aside, there is a genuine question to be asked. Okay, yeah, the guy was a creep and he shouldn't be involved and we should move past him, but is it gonna be good without him? Like, that's a question we don't want to ask, because when it turns out that someone is a horrible monster and they are involved in a thing and they move away from it and the thing continues, we want to believe it can be as good, but they obviously were contributing something. They were contributing to why we liked it. Will it still work without him? Well, that's hard to know for certain, but they're assembling a heck of a team, and I think it is a very wise move with who they are pulling together. Not just in terms of the talent involved, because these are absolutely talented and experienced people, but also the optics, because let's not pretend that that's not a factor here. But who's currently involved in this? Well, Sarah Michelle Gellar is said to reprise the role of Buffy. Now, it is expected to be a legacy continuation where she is a recurring character, but most likely not the primary focus. So she's probably going to take on something a little bit more of an intermittent Giles kind of role, more of a mentor rather than the main focus. And if you know Buffy and its lore and everything, you know that's perfectly viable, despite the original pitch of the show being there is one Slayer in all the world. By the time the show was done, no, actually there's quite a few others. And some of the various things that continued did kind of deal with that. I know the comics did a bit. I wouldn't expect any continuation to treat the comics as canon, so don't necessarily expect that. But anyway, she's on board, and she's also been very vocal about being like, I don't want this to move forward if we're not certain that we're doing something good with it. Now, obviously, that's something anybody can just say, but she's probably had the opportunity to just cash in on Buffy a number of times prior to this, and she seems to have resisted doing so. She's not one of those people who's like, has been pushing, please bring back the thing I'm famous for, I need it. She's been doing her own thing. Anything as big and notable as Buffy? Well, No, not really. That's still what she's most famous for, but she seemed to be fine without it. So it doesn't come across as desperation for her to say that. As for other creatives involved, we know that Academy Award winning director Chloe Zhao is also going to be involved, presumably directing some or possibly even all the episodes, depending on how many episodes in a season this thing ends up being. We don't have any of that kind of information yet. In addition to that, we have Nora and Lola Zuckerman, who are the co-showrunners of the TV show Poker Face, which I've heard very good things about. Haven't gotten around to seeing it because I don't have free time, like ever. But I've heard very good things about. And then I think this one is a pretty big one. There's Gail Berman. Now, Gail Berman is going to be producing, and she was a producer on the original show. So she is someone from behind the scenes who isn't Whedon, who has a lot of experience with this show, with helping ensure that it be the best version of itself that it can be. And don't think for a minute that that's her only TV credit and like she's just been sitting around waiting for the chance to bring it back, because she's been busy in the years since then. I say the most recent notable thing she produced probably Wednesday, which was a pretty dang big hit. So this is a pretty good accumulation of talent, but I also mentioned the optics. You may have noticed it's all women. And that's good optics for a couple reasons. The first is this is ostensibly a female-focused franchise. You know, Buffy is obviously a woman. The entire pitch was always that Slayers were, these special girls, and it was a subversion of the damsel in distress. Like, the original concept came from this idea of, a monster stalking a blonde in an alley, and then the blonde kicks its ass. So there is that general notion, but also, one of the many kinds of criticism that can be thrown at the original run of Buffy is this kind of 90s male-tinged feminism, because Whedon, regardless of whatever else you think of him, did try to present himself as a feminist, but again, a lot of those things haven't aged especially gracefully. It's hard to know how much of that was him and how much of it is just the sheer passage of time. But if we're going to try and retain that, and especially given that a lot of the creepier and less pleasant things that came out about Whedon had to do with his behavior and around and treatment of women, yeah, it's a real good look to have a behind-the-scenes creative team of all women. And again, I don't want to make any implication that this is tokenism. Like, these are all very talented and skilled people. They can do this job. But let's not pretend like the optics are an accident. That happened on purpose because it's a smart thing to do if you're trying to move away from the image of the tainted and fallen would-be male feminist who originally was the creative force behind the show. If you're trying to move on from that, well, have it be all women is going to help. It's going to help maintain that image of we're moving past that guy and we have this team of very talented women telling a story about women, and they're the ones pushing it forward. It's a very savvy move. In an odd way, it actually kind of reminds me of Lovecraft Country. Now, I never read the original book, which is written by a white guy, but the TV show, which I had very mixed feelings on, but one of the things that I really appreciated about it conceptually was that one of the main overriding problems with trying to adapt Lovecraft directly as opposed to just taking a Lovecraftian approach to horror is that Lovecraft was a real big racist. Like, even for the time, he was a lot. But to take his notions of cosmic horror and forces you can't understand and make direct parallels to the mechanisms and the pressures and the existence of institutional racism and comparing and drawing parallels between these horrifying Lovecraftian otherworldly beings that don't care if you live or die and this system that doesn't care if you live or die as long as you stay in your place. That was brilliant. Again, I have very mixed feelings about the execution on that show, but that's a really fantastic way to counteract a lot of the problems with the original creator. And bringing in a team of all women, from the director, the star, the producer, the showrunners, to retool and continue an ostensibly feminist show made by a guy who no matter what he thought of himself and presented himself as, did not live up to feminist ideals. How hard was he trying? I don't know. I don't care. But he certainly was failing. Yeah, bringing in a team of all women, that's a real good way to move forward with it. Now, will it be any good? I have no idea. Like, my assessment of it right now has everything to do with the conception of it, the idea of it, the optics of what it is they're doing, and the potential of it. This has the potential to create a blueprint for certain kinds of properties to be able to move past the problematic people who created them. And some properties are able to do that easier than others. It has a bit to do with how entrenched is the person who is the problem. If I knew more about something like Rick and Morty, I could maybe talk about the issues with Justin Roiland and how that show has attempted to continue without him. But I honestly don't know enough about it. I never got into it. I tried. I didn't really like it. Turned out to be a good call in the long run, at least in terms of not having my heart broken again. Because, no matter how many times you just feel that sinking feeling of the creator of something that you love just turning out to be trash, it doesn't stop hurting, even when you get old and cynical like me. Hey. But I think maybe in some ways we might also be able to make a comparison to something like the conclusion we're going to be having for Good Omens. Now, Good Omens is a little bit different because it has the benefit of Neil Gaiman not being the sole creator of the original works. There was the late Terry Pratchett, and his estate is kind of taking over and overseeing everything. Now, Gaiman had been very, very involved in the TV adaptation because Pratchett wasn't around. But with everything that has gone on with Gaiman, and I've talked way too damn much about that guy, I don't think it is a completely cynical thing or even a thing that necessarily benefits him to give us a conclusion to this show that, yes, he'd been very much tied to because, he'd worked on the scripts and because he was involved in the original novel, he was like the person that was being interviewed and being referenced, but he wasn't the sole creative voice. He was half of the creative voice. Actually, arguably less. It's really hard to know with anything co-written like that, like how much was contributed from one writer, how much was another. And more often than not, the writers themselves couldn't tell you that. But here's what I will say. Good Omens has the essence and feel and tone and writing style that is more Pratchett than Gaiman. That's not me trying to minimize Gaiman's contributions. It would be very tempting to do so, but the thing is, one of the things the man is able to do is write in other people's styles. I saw him do that with a biography that he wrote about Douglas Adams, which he wrote in Douglas Adams's writing style. So I know he's capable of doing that. But anyways, this has become a little bit of a tangent. I think one of the things that this can really be helpful with what we're seeing with Buffy is that it can show us that if, and unfortunately it is an if, because in some cases you can't, but if it is possible to properly detach the problematic element, be it an original creator, an actor, whatever, but in this case, let's talk about original creators. If you can detach it from them and manage it in a way that doesn't benefit them financially or social clout or whatever else, it is good to know that there may still be ways to move forward, because one of the things that really sucks whenever this nonsense happens is it just feels like we can't have nice things. It just feels like these things that we cared about and meant something to us become hard to continue to enjoy because of the connection that they have to assholes. And we shouldn't have to move on from all these things. And I do tend to stress that the only one that I feel you really can't support is Harry Potter, because she has a unique amount of control over the property, and she is wielding everything that she gets from that influence, financials, the works in her campaign of transphobia. There is no way to support Harry Potter, anything new from Harry Potter, certainly, without benefiting her. It is not necessary that anything new Buffy related actually benefit Whedon, and financially, it won't. So there's just a little bit of hope in me. And again, I don't know if it'll be any good. Who knows? Way too early to make that call. But just the idea of it coming together and giving the possibility of some of these things at least. We don't have to abandon them fully. We can still find joy and good in these works. And I hope we get to have that with Buffy if it keeps moving forward. And it's looking more likely than I would have thought. What are your thoughts on all this? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. Those all help me out. Don't worry too much about it, though. What I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Goddess Elida, Zubin Lafula, Jen, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Oliver B., Melissa Pedersen, Movie Turtle, Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Auntie Kate 808, Andre, Becky Sparks, Claire Wright, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Kasparov, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Toku Blahuvian, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, Pal Barabajagal, Mary Mello, Mira G, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. If you want to help me ensure that I can keep these guys fed, as well as the other animals and strange creatures that sometimes occupy my house, check out the rewards on the Patreon. Yeah, hello to you too. Bless you.